Spring Boot Practice Test 2026 Spring Boot Framework Java Microservices Exam Questions and Answers. Question 1. Which annotation is used to mark the main class of a Spring Boot application? At Spring Boot Application. At Enable Auto Configuration. At REST Controller. At Service. At Spring Boot Application is a convenience annotation that includes at Configuration, at Enable Auto Configuration, and at Component Scan. Question 2. What is the default port for a Spring Boot application? 8081, 8080, 9090, 443. By default, the embedded Tomcat server starts on port 8080. Question 3. Which starter dependency is required for building web applications, including RESTful services? Spring Boot Starter Data JPA, Spring Boot Starter Web, Spring Boot Starter Security, Spring Boot Starter Test. Spring Boot Starter Web provides all dependencies for web development including Jackson and Tomcat. Question 4. Where does Spring Boot look for application properties by default? src/main/resources/config.xml, src/main/resources/application.properties, src/main/java/app settings, pom.xml. Application.properties or application.yml in the class path is the default configuration source. Question 5. What does at REST controller combine? At controller and at response body, at controller and at service, at component and at repository, at service and at response body. At REST controller is a specialized version of at controller that automatically adds at response body to all handler methods. Question 6. Which annotation is used to inject dependencies in Spring? At inject, at auto-wired, at resource, all of the above. At auto-wired is the Spring-specific way, while at inject and at resource are standard Java annotations supported by Spring. Question 7. What is the purpose of Spring Boot DevTools? To package the application for production, to provide automatic restarts and live reload during development, to monitor application health, to manage database migrations. DevTools improves developer productivity by automatically restarting the app when class path files change. Question 8. How can you change the server port in Spring Boot? Server.port equals 9000 in application.properties, changing the pom.xml, using at port 9000. It cannot be changed. The property server.port is used to override the default 8080. Question 9. Which Spring Boot Actuator endpoint provides information about application health, /info, /metrics, /health, /env? The /health endpoint displays the status of the application and its components. Question 10. What is dependency injection? A way to manually create objects. A design pattern where objects receive their dependencies from an external source. A database connection pooling technique. A way to compile Java code. D allows for loose coupling by letting the Spring container manage object lifecycles and relationships. Question 11. Which annotation is used to map an HTTP GET request to a specific handler method? At GET mapping, at POST mapping, at PUT mapping, at request mapping. At GET mapping is a composed annotation that acts as a shortcut for at request mapping, method equals request method.get. Question 12. In Spring Data JPA, what interface can you extend to get CRUD operations for an entity? JPA repository, CRUD repository, paging and sorting repository, all of the above. JPA repository extends paging and sorting repository, which extends CRUD repository. Question 13. What does the service annotation indicate? The class is a web controller. The class contains business logic. The class is a database repository. The class is a configuration class. It is a specialization of a component used for service layer classes. Question 14. How do you enable Spring Boot Actuator in a project? Add Spring Boot Starter Actuator dependency. Add enable Actuator to the main class. It is enabled by default in all Java apps. Configure it in the OS environment. Adding the starter dependency includes the management endpoints. Question 15. Which tool is used to generate a basic Spring Boot project structure? Spring Initializer, Maven Central, Java Compiler, Eclipse IDE. Spring Initialize, start.spring.io, is the standard way to bootstrap a project. Question 16. What is the role of @path variable? To handle query parameters, to extract values from the URI path, to map form data, to set session variables. It is used to bind a method parameter to a path variable in the URL. Question 17. Which profile is active by default in Spring Boot? Prod, Dev Default, None. Unless specified, Spring Boot uses the default profile. Question 18. What is an embedded server in Spring Boot? A server installed on the OS. A server packaged as part of the application jar. A remote cloud server. A database server. Spring Boot includes servers like Tomcat or Jetty within the jar, so you don't need a separate installation. Question 19. Which annotation is used to define a configuration class? @config, @configuration, @bean, @settings. @configuration indicates that a class contains bean definitions. Question 20. True or false? Spring Boot requires an external XML configuration file. True, false. Spring Boot favors Java-based configuration and annotation-driven development over XML.